Hey guys, Dan here with today's quarantine video, and this is something that I have been excited about for a few months now, ever since I heard the announcement. But I watched the Beastie Boys Story documentary last night. It's on Apple TV Plus, so if you have access to that app, I say watch it. If not, maybe you can track it down another way. Maybe it'll be on DVD at some point. I don't know, but I'm wearing my Beastie Boys Sabotage shirt here from the video. This is one of the two or three shirts that I almost always get compliments on when I wear it somewhere. I have a Smashing Pumpkins one as well that gets a lot of compliments. But whenever I wear this Beastie Boys Sabotage one, at least one person inevitably will be like, "Hey, nice shirt," because this song, this video, was a touchstone for people in my age group. I mean, I was in high school when it came out. So I guess not only do I want to talk about the movie, but I guess my own brief history with the Beastie Boys. So when we first got MTV, it was like late '86, and it introduced me to popular music. I didn't really know. I mean, I listened to my parents' music before that. The Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, which were all great. Love them. But, when we got MTV and I was introduced to Peter Gabriel and the Bangles and Cyndi Lauper and Genesis and Madonna and Billy Idol, it opened up this whole new world for me. And one of the first really, heavy rotation videos I remember on MTV was Fight for Your Right to Party. I mean, it came out, right around that time. The License to Ill album was huge. Hopefully you know a little bit about the history of Beastie Boys. You're not, really watching this video, but, License to Ill was the first rap album to be at #1, and, they were huge. And then they weren't for several years. Their second album was a flop. It's now regarded as a hip-hop masterpiece, but at the time it was a flop. And it took them, a little bit of time to climb their way back into our hearts, and Sabotage was one of the huge things that did that. Beastie Boys were real big in my formative years of having my own music, aside from my parents, having a pop music background, and certainly my first foray really into hip-hop, because the Run DMC hit Walk This Way had kind of come and gone by then. So, It's Tricky was kind of out, but, I mean, it was nothing compared to Fight for Your Right to Party. That was a huge, huge song and a huge video. So that's kind of my brief little history with the Beastie Boys. Of course, once I got into alternative radio in the late '90s in terms of programming it and being a DJ and stuff, the Hello Nasty album came out. So Intergalactic was a huge hit back then. And so they had a few hits while I was working in radio as well. But I finally got to see them live in... I'm not exactly sure the year. I want to say maybe 2003, 2004. It was a festival show for the station I actually used to intern at, Y100 in Philadelphia, which is no longer. But this was one of the last concerts I guess they had, because I think they changed formats in '05 maybe, or '04. So it was right around that time. But the Strokes were there. The Strokes and the Beastie Boys were kind of like the headliners, but there was a lot of cool bands there. Tenacious D was there. With Jack Black and Kyle Gass. But, I mean, Beastie Boys, to see them live, I'm so glad I got to. There's definitely been people that I've missed along the way and have now passed away. I never got to see David Bowie, and I saw Chris Cornell, but not with Soundgarden, and that kind of thing. But thankfully, I got to see Prince once. I got to see the Beastie Boys once. So, very, very happy about that. Got to see Tom Petty twice before he passed. But anyway, so let's talk now about the movie. It's called The Beastie Boys Story. And if you don't know, 1/3 of the Beastie Boys, Adam Yauch, has passed away. He died of cancer about 13 years ago. I think it was 2007. So he is present here only in archival footage. But the other two guys, Ad Rock and Mike Diamond, and Adam Horowitz, are still alive and well, and they are right about 50 years old. So they wrote a book a few years ago, and this is basically the companion piece to that book. It's directed by Spike Jonze, who directed the Sabotage video and a lot of their big videos, although Adam Yauch directed a lot of the videos as well under his pseudonym Nathaniel Hornblower. But Spike Jonze and the Sabotage video really put them back on the map. If you don't know Spike Jonze, by the way, he's also directed videos for Weezer. He did that very famous Buddy Holly video. And I'm trying to think of what else he's done in the video world. I feel like maybe one of the Bjork videos was his. Maybe one of the White Stripes videos. I mean, his name gets thrown around a lot. But Sabotage and Buddy Holly, coming out right around the same time, he really blew up as a video filmmaker there. So he directs this, and essentially it's a TED Talk, pretty much, with the two guys, the two remaining members of the Beastie Boys. The group is no more. They decided a few years after Adam's death to basically just never perform again. No, you know what? It couldn't be 07, because I think they were talking about their last concert with him was around that time. So maybe he died. Maybe he died in the last 10 years. Maybe it was like 2012 or something. I don't remember. But anyway, they decided a couple years after that to basically disband the group. They're never going to record again. They're never going to perform again. But they wrote this book, and now they're I don't know if this was like a national tour that they did or just sort of a one-stop shop to record the movie. But it essentially is a TED Talk. And what's interesting about the way they decided to do this is there's no outside influence here. I mean, this is the Beastie Boys Story directly from the only two living people that were there for the whole thing, that lived it. And one thing they point out is it was actually Adam Yauch's group, and they joined. So it really made sense for them to not do the Beastie Boys, since they weren't there since the very, very beginning, even though they knew the people that were, and were sort of friends with them and stuff. And they go over all that. I think this was a very clever way to do it. Most documentaries you see sort of talking heads, and oh yeah, I remember when this happened, and they would go interview so and so at MTV, or so and so at the record label, and oh yeah, I could tell the Beasties were going to be huge, like whatever. It's almost like meaningless interview snippets. But here, it's directly from the two guys that lived it, and they take you from the absolute infancy, inception of the band when they were 15, 16 years old, through opening on tour for Madonna in the mid 80s, before License to Ill even came out. Opening for Run DMC, License to Ill hitting huge, second album, they were so proud of, and it flopped, so they kind of went their separate ways for a little bit, came back together, did a couple other records, and it goes through the entire chronology of the band, really sort of stopping at their comeback in the late 90s with Hello Nasty and the song Intergalactic. It doesn't really move much past there, other than to say, hey, this was our last show ever that we didn't know at the time was at Bonnaroo, and then Adam Yauch died 2 years later, so that would be our last show. So there's sort of about 10 years where they don't really talk about that much. But in all honesty, the real crux of the story here is how the band formed, and how it became so huge, and what happened. And I don't think they necessarily needed to say a lot of things in the 2000s, because they were sort of riding a high. And by that point, once Hello Nasty had come out, they were basically legendary status. And so, they released, another couple records, and they had another few radio hits and whatever. But I think really the bulk of this story, starts in the early-ish 80s, 83, 84, somewhere in there, and then goes through about 2000. That's really the main story anyway. But, these guys have lived and died by the edict of be funny, be clever, and they get to showcase their own personality so well in the documentary just as human beings who lived this, not rappers, not comedians, not, just two men in their early 50s who have a story to tell about their livelihoods, with this group and the ups and downs. And really it was, pretty no holds barred. I mean, they talk a lot about how misogynistic they were in the 80s and how stupid and fight for your right to party was meant as a goof, as a joke on frat guys. And then they, because of their fame, became those frat guys. And they were completely different than they started out, because of how the song blew up and how people didn't really get that it was tongue-in-cheek. And so that, they would go back home to Brooklyn and their friends wouldn't recognize them, I mean, they would, from a fame perspective, but, they were not the people that they knew. So, it's this interesting journey of, like, evolving as humans. Like, and that's why I would recommend this movie to people that even aren't Beastie Boys fans. I mean, maybe if you hate the Beastie Boys, okay, but, if you're just a casual fan, or if maybe you don't know a lot about them except for a couple of songs, I would recommend this to anybody just because it is a great take on human evolution, and maturing and looking back at some things that you thought were cool at the time, and you realize that wasn't who you want to be, and stuff. Well, one of the things that really struck out to me, this one line in the movie where they're talking about how when Hello Nasty came out, there was a song on it that really was like trying to be uplifting to women and stuff. And a reporter was like, don't you feel like a hypocrite for, having all these, misogynistic lyrics in your earlier hits, and now talking about, this in a different way. And Ad Rock's response was, I would rather be a hypocrite than be the same person forever. And that was just like this. I mean, that's a philosophy I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life. I mean, it was such a brilliant thing to say, a brilliant response. And Mike D even says, as he's retelling the story, he was like, I didn't know what Ad Rock was going to say when she asked that question, but his answer blew me away, and me as well, watching it. One thing that I sort of wish they did talk about, because it was definitely a dark, stupid frat boy type period in their history. They originally wanted to call their big breakthrough album, License to Ill, they wanted to call it Don't Be a Faggot. Because look, it was 1985, the AIDS crisis was big. Thank God the record label talked them out of it, because I don't think we'd be sitting here talking about the movie or the band if that were the case, because I think everybody would have dismissed them as being just smug a-holes and da-da-da-da-da. License to Ill, I'm glad they changed the name. And what's funny is, I don't think, even then, I don't think they really believed, in homophobia and oh, I hate gays. They were just being 16-year-old kids, being stupid or whatever. Maybe they were 18 by that point, but still. So it just shows the evolution of a band but not even of a band, of a human in this movie, and it's so great in that regard. But also, it's a really, really nice tribute to MCA, Adam Yauch. At a couple different times, some of the guys get choked up. I definitely got choked up when, I guess it was it Mike? I guess it was Mike D. No, it was Ad Rock. When Ad Rock was getting choked up telling a story about Adam, and sort of his legacy and stuff, and it got me as well, in the feels. But these are guys who really not only did pretty much everything the way they wanted to do it, which is rare in itself, but learning from all of their mistakes and learning from, the industry can be very, very cold, and we've seen that time and time again, going back to shows like Behind the Music or, different documentaries about different bands. You can see how cold, the industry can be, or even non-documentaries, even narrative movies like Straight Outta Compton or Love and Mercy, can show us that. And these guys, never. I mean, they parted ways a little bit, but they always remained friends, and that helped too. And like there's a funny line where they're recording. I think it was Check Your Head, and they were talking about like the use of computer technology in music and sampling and stuff. And Adam Yauch was like, "Oh yeah, like this is how this goes. You just do this, this, and this." And the other two guys were like, "Wait, like how do you know all this stuff?" He was like, "We spend every second of the day together. How does he just happen to know things when we've never seen him like pick up a book about it or study it, or it was before Google and YouTube?" So they obviously miss their friend a lot and love him dearly, and I think every Beastie Boy fan feels the same way, but these guys obviously had a much more personal connection. So this movie acts as not just a chronological history of one of the greatest and most influential hip-hop acts of all time, but as a really, really touching tribute to their friend. And I think it really was brilliant the way it was recorded, like a TED Talk. It was like no other documentary I've ever seen. It was like I was at a live show, not music show, but like a live speech, from these guys. And it was shot very well because of Spike Jonze's direction. And he was, there's a ton, it's not just two guys standing on stage the whole time. I don't want to give you that impression. They played a ton of clips as they talked, whether it be music video clips or interview snippets, or whatever. They played them on the big screen as they were talking, and so the story flowed naturally that way as well. And as a bonus, after about midway through the credits, after they play the entire intergalactic video over the credits, stick around because there is really cool archival footage from the early days of MTV. There's this like B-boy battle where they challenge Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch to play basketball, and so you see a really young Mark Wahlberg and Dan Cortez from MTV Sports. Like that kind of stuff was really interesting. You see, old Joan Rivers video, from her talk show, old American Bandstand, old Soul Train video. I mean, the amount of archival footage just throughout the movie, but also at the end credits is just stunning, and it's put together so well. The only complaint I think I have about this movie is that because it is in more of a TED Talk type fashion, everything's pre-scripted more or less. I think there's a couple of ad-libs in there, but the bulk of the story is pre-scripted, and you can see it in a couple places on the teleprompters. And these guys are great musicians, great songwriters, funny as hell, but they're not really actors, so there's a little bit of a stiffness in some parts as they're sort of like reading, because they don't want to mess up the sentence or something. So that's really one of the only complaints I can think of about this movie. And then the other thing is, I'm not sure. Like, if you're not a Beastie Boys fan at all, or if you have no interest in hip hop culture, or if you have no interest in the music business and how it works, I don't know how much you'll get out of that side of it, but I think even still you would get out of it the experiences of a person who achieved fame, people, I should say, not a person, but people that achieved fame at a very young age, didn't really know what to do with it, got lost in themselves, became jerk-offs, and then grew from that experience. I think there's a lesson to be learned by everybody from that part of the movie. So, do you need to see 2 hours of it if you're not a Beastie Boys fan? No, probably not. You could probably get the Cliff Notes version, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the best music documentaries I think I've ever seen. I mean, it's brilliant on so many levels. It's easily the best thing on Apple Plus TV. I mean, they've got a few shows that I really like, but this tops everything that they've put out so far. So kudos to them for securing it. But yeah, I leave the Beastie Boys Story with a very, very solid A. It's probably the best thing I've seen all year. I haven't given out any A pluses this year, so up till now, I would say it's probably the best thing I've seen all year. It's a brilliant, brilliant documentary. Cannot recommend it high enough. So thanks for watching. That is my quarantine video for the day. Go listen to some Beastie Boys tunes if you don't have time quite to watch the whole movie yet. But if you don't have Apple Plus, I would honestly recommend getting the 7-day trial just so you can watch this movie. If you don't want to pay for it, then sure, you can, and then you can sort of sample some of their other shows too if you're interested in like the morning show or whatever. But yeah, they do, I think, still offer that 7-day free trial. So, nothing to lose. Free trial. You get to watch the Beastie Boys documentary and be on your merry way. So, tomorrow I will have a Connors review for you. There's 2 episodes left in the season, so we'll get to one of those tomorrow. Then Wednesday's Masked Singer, so I'll have my guesses for that. Thursday, probably, I will have another TV news and reviews for you for the week. And then Friday, I've already recorded a Frasier Friday with Joe over Zoom, so the whole rest of the week is planned out already on my channel, so come back for all of those videos, or at least some of them. But hopefully you've enjoyed this one. Hopefully you're a Beastie Boys fan like myself. But like I said, even if you're not, I think you should give this movie a try regardless. I think it's a really great, great story just in general, leaving aside the music, So, all right, thank you so much for watching, and be safe. We'll see you next time.